In 2024, a gray, misty morning followed a night of relentless rain over Olympic National Forest. The air was cold, thick with the scent of decaying leaves. A veteran park ranger, a man who knew every mossy stone and tangled root of this place, was patrolling a remote area rarely touched by human footsteps. Suddenly, the ground beneath him gave way. A large patch of soil collapsed, revealing something metallic beneath corroded, circular, half buried under dirt and twisted roots. He knelt to take a closer look, and as his flashlight swept across the edge of the structure, he stumbled back in shock. A skeletal hand protruded from a dark opening below. Heart-pounding, he forced the heavy door open. A gust of stale, moldy air rushed up to greet him, accompanied by the eerie squeal of rusted hinges, a sound that suggested no one had entered this place for years. A staircase descended into a space no one expected, an underground laboratory hidden deep beneath the forest floor. The room was abandoned and silent, everything coated in layers of dust. Shattered glass crunched under his boots. Power cables hung like webs from the ceiling. But what froze him in place at the center of the room was a long steel table. On it lay 3 human skeletons, perfectly aligned side by side, each one restrained with metal cuffs locked around their wrists. There was no room for doubt. When investigators arrived and ran forensic analysis, they confirmed a chilling truth. These were the 3 tourists who vanished in 2016, people who had disappeared into thin air, leaving families to wonder for 8 long years. What happened to them in the darkness beneath the earth? Before they became a tragic headline, before their names were tied forever to a hidden chamber beneath the earth, they were simply 3 close friends with dreams like any others. Ethan Walker, Michael Reyes, and Samantha Sam Turner met during their freshman year at the University of Washington. They came from different places, different upbringings, yet something about their personalities clicked instantly. They formed a trio that many on campus admired: the adventurous one, the mindful one, and the heart of the group. Ethan, tall and energetic, was always the spark. He studied environmental science and spent every free moment outdoors, kayaking, climbing, mapping new trails. The forest made him feel alive. He often said nature was the only place that never lies. After graduation, he took a job with a conservation nonprofit, guiding school groups and volunteering for park cleanups. He saw the world as an endless path, waiting to be explored. Michael was different, quiet, observant, always carrying a small notebook. He majored in data analysis, but secretly, he loved writing. His journal overflowed with sketches of trees, poems inspired by rainy days, and detailed accounts of every trip they ever took. While Ethan belonged to the wild, Michael belonged to memory. He believed adventures only truly lived on if they were written down. Sam, meanwhile, filled every silent space with warmth. She studied media production and dreamed of creating documentaries about the hidden beauties of America's national parks. Her camera was practically glued to her hands. Friends joked she saw the world in frames and lighting angles. Her laughter kept the group tethered to joy, even when life felt chaotic. Together, they promised that no matter how busy adulthood became, they would travel once a year, just the 3 of them, to remember who they were before responsibilities piled up. In the summer of 2016, that promise brought them to Olympic National Forest. Ethan suggested at first he had recently learned about a remote trail on the western side of the forest, rarely mentioned in guidebooks. The path wound through old-growth wilderness, past forgotten research cabins from decades ago, and led toward a secluded ridge with jaw-dropping views of the Pacific. Michael hesitated at the idea, not out of fear, but practicality. The trail wasn't officially maintained. Maps showed areas where forest reclaimed pathways and signals disappeared entirely. But Ethan's enthusiasm was contagious, and Sam's eyes lit up at the thought of capturing untouched scenery. Eventually, Michael agreed. After all, he always did. They planned the trip with excitement and meticulous care. 3 days in the wild. Lightweight packs, emergency radios, GPS tracker. Sam would film the entire experience for a future documentary pitch. Michael would journal everything, as usual. Ethan would lead the navigation. On the morning of August 9th, 2016, they set off, leaving their car at a quiet trailhead few hikers used. The weather was perfect, sunlight filtering through towering spruce, a gentle breeze rustling the ferns. Their phones captured early smiles, jokes about who would complain first when the trail became steep. But somewhere along that path, the forest swallowed them. As they pushed deeper into the wilderness, the trail markers disappeared. Vegetation grew denser. Old wire fencing peeked through the moss, strange remnants from a facility the government once operated but later removed from official records. Ethan dismissed it as obsolete infrastructure. Sam filmed it with curiosity. Michael wrote a line in his journal that would later haunt investigators. Strange humming underground. Feels like the earth is breathing. That was the final entry found in his notebook. When they failed to return home, the search launched quickly. Their families insisted that Ethan's skills made them safer than most hikers. But rescue teams found only scattered belongings, a broken camera lens, a shredded backpack strap, and nothing more. No footprints leading out. No sign of a struggle. No farewell call. Authorities eventually labeled it a tragic disappearance in dangerous terrain. The case faded beneath the weight of newer headlines. But their loved ones held on to hope, year after year, refusing to believe that three bright souls could disappear without a trace. 8 years later, on a rainy morning in 2024, a ranger would descend a hidden staircase and discover their remains laid neatly in a cold, silent room far below the forest floor where they had once walked freely. Their final journey had not been one of nature and beauty. It had led them straight into a secret meant to stay buried. On the second morning of their journey, August 10th, 2016, the forest felt different. The light struggled to break through the dense canopy, and a faint mist hovered close to the ground, muffling distant sounds. Animals that usually rustled in the underbrush were nowhere to be heard. Ethan noticed the silence first. He commented that the woods felt too still, but tried to hide his discomfort behind a grin. Michael later wrote that the air seemed heavier, as if the forest itself was listening. Sam was the only one energized by the eerie atmosphere. Her camera hummed as she documented the unusual remnants of human presence they kept stumbling upon: steel poles jutting from the soil and cables tangled in the roots, all too advanced to be remnants from simple park maintenance. The deeper they ventured, the more the wilderness seemed to wrap around forgotten scars left by something classified. By early afternoon, they reached a narrow stream. They paused for lunch, joking to break the tension. Michael filmed Ethan trying to balance on a fallen log and nearly slipping into the dark water. For a moment, they felt like themselves again. Three best friends chasing sunsets and the thrill of discovery. But the moment dissolved when Sam pointed to faint tire tracks leading off the main route, tracks far too fresh for a trail no longer listed on modern maps. Ethan raised his backpack and said, "Let's see where this goes." They followed the tracks deeper into the woods. Their GPS tracker began losing signal. Radio static drowned out all communication attempts. Trees closed in tighter, branches interlocking like a barrier against retreat. Then they found a rusted chain-link fence extending through the forest until it disappeared into the brush. Attached to the fence hung a metal sign so corroded its text was barely legible. Sam brought the camera close, zooming in on the faded words. "Property of Pacific Biotechnology, authorized personnel only." Michael frowned. That company had dissolved years earlier after a scandal involving illegal medical trials, lawsuits, missing research records, government investigations, and then silence. Why would this name still exist here, hidden behind layers of moss and time? A wind blew, carrying a metallic odor, like rust or blood. Ethan found a section of fencing that had collapsed, likely from storm damage. He pushed it aside and motioned for them to pass through. Unease flickered in Michael's eyes, but Ethan's confidence pulled him along. Sam followed closely, camera running. Just beyond the fence stood a dilapidated structure, concrete walls cracked by tree roots, windows shattered, the roof sagging under years of neglect. No doors remained on their hinges. Graffiti covered parts of the exterior, but the marks looked recent, as if someone had been here not long ago. Inside, the building was stripped, empty hallways leading nowhere. Broken lights dangled from the ceiling like vines. Something about the place didn't feel abandoned at all, more like paused. Michael's notebook later revealed their last recorded conversation. "It feels like someone was working here. Maybe still is. If there's anything dangerous, it's probably long gone. Or waiting." They pressed deeper, Ethan leading with his flashlight. In the basement, they stumbled upon a steel hatch embedded in the concrete floor, locked but not welded shut. Sam filmed every angle, whispering, "This is huge. This could be the story that changes everything." Before they could decide what to do with the hatch, a low humming vibrated beneath their feet. Mechanical, powerful, alive. The noise grew louder, like turbines activating. Dust fell from the ceiling. Michael grabbed Ethan's arm. "We should leave. Now." They climbed back into daylight, but the forest no longer felt like an escape route. The wind carried whispers, faint, rhythmic, almost human. As the sun dipped below the tree line, they reached an open clearing where roots had been torn apart as if something massive had pushed upward from below. Sam scanned the area with her camera, her expression shifting from curiosity to fear. Her video captured the moment everything changed. A metal plate disguised under dirt suddenly slid open, revealing a rectangular shaft leading into darkness. A cold, artificial light flickered underneath. The hum returned. Something metallic shifted within the void, scraping against steel. Sam gasped and stepped back, camera trembling. Ethan approached slowly, peering inside. Michael's voice cracked as he yelled, "Ethan, stop! We don't know what that is!" But movement from below seized Ethan's attention. A smooth cable snaked upward like a living limb, catching the light for a split second before the camera cut out. Screams echoed. The feed ended. Search teams later recovered fragments of Sam's damaged camera near that clearing. No footprints led away. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them whole. And for 8 long years, that footage and one final line scrawled hastily in Michael's notebook were the only clues to their fate. "Door in the ground. We're not alone." It would not be until 2024, in a silent laboratory buried beneath roots and stone, that the horrible truth would finally surface, and the 3 friends would be found not lost to the wilderness, but claimed by something much darker. The moment Ethan, Michael, and Sam failed to show up at home, alarms were raised. Their families were not the kind to wait days before worrying. They knew the trio was responsible, well-prepared, and always in contact during their adventures. On August 12, 2016, the official search began. Helicopters combed the forest from above, scanning every ridge and valley. Search dogs followed faint trails that repeatedly vanished into nothingness. Rangers, volunteers, and rescue specialists pushed through tangled undergrowth, calling out names that were swallowed instantly by the vast wilderness. But the forest offered no answers. At the abandoned building discovered earlier by the friends, investigators found signs confirming they had been there. 3 sets of footprints, matching shoe sizes. A broken light panel near the stairwell. A torn strap from Ethan's backpack. Scratches around the hatch in the basement floor. It was clear they had tried to open it. Yet there were no tracks leading away, almost as if they had disappeared in the very room they stood in. Inside a patch of thorny brush nearby, searchers uncovered a battered notebook. Michael's unmistakable handwriting filled its pages. Most of it detailed mundane hiking notes, weather, trail markers, jokes Ethan made to lighten the mood, but the final entry was more rushed, desperate. "The ground opened. There are lights below. We shouldn't be here. If anything happens, tell them to look underneath." The words chilled the investigators. Underneath what? The forest? The building? The entire park? Authorities dismissed this possibility, at first believing the stress of being lost could have influenced his state of mind, but Sam's damaged camera suggested otherwise. Technicians recovered fragments of corrupted footage. Though the video was dark and shaky, a few frames clearly showed a metal structure moving beneath the earth. accompanied by that same low mechanical hum. The frame that haunted viewers most. Ethan, leaning over a glowing opening, moments before the recording cut off. Still, officials refused to conclude foul play. Days turned into weeks. Rescue teams expanded their perimeter. They relied on drones and thermal scanners. They searched ravines, streams, and dense ravines where vegetation choked sunlight. Nothing surfaced, not a trace of clothing, equipment, or even food wrappers. Instead, they found odd remnants. A bundle of industrial cables hidden under a tarp newer than the abandoned building. A padlock stuck inside a tree's bark, as if the forest had been trying to bury evidence. A patch of earth unnaturally smooth, like heavy machinery once pressed down there. Questions multiplied. Why would an inactive biotech company leave infrastructure so deep in public land? And why wasn't any of this documented in park maintenance logs? When families demanded answers, the case took an unsettling turn. Government officials arrived, not park authorities, but personnel, dressed in plain clothes, carrying identification that rangers were not allowed to verify. They confiscated certain recovered items without explanation, including damaged electronic parts and an unmarked keyring found beside a half-buried concrete slab. After that intervention, the tone of the investigation shifted. The public narrative changed. From 3 experienced hikers, vanished mysteriously, to likely succumb to dangerous terrain. Press conferences stopped. Reporters moved on to newer tragedies. Eventually, the search was officially suspended. Yet hope did not fade for everyone. Ethan's parents returned to the forest every summer, leaving maps and messages pinned to trail boards. Sam's mother kept posting updates online, begging anyone with information to come forward. Michael's younger sister became obsessed with finding out what truly happened, and she noticed something others had missed. Satellite imagery of the area from the past decade showed repeated soil disturbances in specific coordinates, including the exact place where the ranger fell through the ground in 2024. Someone or something had been moving underneath the forest for years. But that revelation came too late. The case was sealed, evidence archived, and official reports stated that the trio likely died due to exposure and wildlife. A conclusion built on convenience, not truth. 8 years dragged by, leaving grief to harden into bitter endurance. It wasn't until that stormy morning in 2024 when the earth cracked open, revealing a rusted door no one was meant to find, that the truth clawed its way back into the light. 3 skeletons, perfectly arranged, wrists bound in steel. 3 young lives stolen, not by nature, but by human hands. And the most frightening part was not the laboratory itself, but the unanswered question: where did the people who built it go? 15 years had passed since Ethan Walker, Samantha Turner, and Michael Reyes vanished without a trace inside Olympic National Forest. The search had grown cold, families had endured unbearable silence, and their names had slowly faded from news cycles. Friends who had once held nightly vigils returned to daily responsibilities. Hope did not disappear entirely, just grew quieter, tucked away in the corners of memory. The forest, however, held on to the truth. By the time the year 2025 arrived, the disappearance had become a cautionary tale told by hikers, like a local legend whispered around campfires. Some insisted the trio had been swept away by a landslide. Others believed they'd encountered a hidden mine shaft or dangerous wildlife. A few more imaginative minds suggested something darker lurked within those woods, something human. None of the theories ever led to answers, only speculation. Then, after a week of unrelenting rainstorms, fate intervened. Jason Cole, a seasoned park ranger who had patrolled the remoter sectors of Olympic for a decade, knew the forest better than most. On a drizzly September morning, he was assigned to inspect an isolated ravine where heavy rainfall had triggered soil movement. Moss-covered logs and uprooted ferns lay scattered like soldiers fallen in battle. The earth's surface looked wounded, deep cracks splitting through the undergrowth. He stepped cautiously along the ridge, radio crackling in intermittent bursts. A fresh collapse had opened a large cavity in the hillside. Water trickled down into darkness. Jason crouched and aimed his flashlight into the void. A faint metallic reflection caught his eye. Straight lines and riveted corners, uncharacteristic of anything natural. As he moved closer, his boot nudged a slab of misaligned concrete. Beneath it, partially revealed by the landslide, lay a rust-stained steel hatch. His pulse quickened. He brushed away mud and debris. The hatch appeared decades old, its hinges nearly fused by corrosion. A warning sign. Its letters, faded and peeling, bore only fragments of words. Authorized personnel only. The ranger exhaled sharply, noting that no record of such a structure existed on any park maintenance map. He radioed his supervisor, but the storm-damaged signal dropped. Alone in the quiet, he hesitated, then pushed. The hatch groaned open, releasing a stale, chemical-tinged odor. Jason directed his beam downward and froze. A skeletal hand jutted from the entrance, thin bones tangled in remnants of cloth, fingers frozen stiff as if clinging to the edge, desperate to escape. His breath vanished. He backed away quickly, but duty forced him to regain composure. He leaned in again, sweeping the light deeper. A concrete stairwell descended beneath the earth. Within hours, the site was swarming with law enforcement, forensic teams, and federal officials who looked as puzzled as they were alarmed. Temporary floodlights illuminated the exposed structure. Agents donned protective suits and breached the underground space. What they discovered stole the air from everyone's lungs. Inside lay a forgotten laboratory carved into the rock, old research equipment coated in grime, metal tables arranged in clinical formation, broken glass scattered like shrapnel across the floor. Thick cables dangled from the ceiling like the remains of an extinct creature's nervous system. Dust muted the colors of once sterile walls. And there, lying side by side on 3 stainless steel exam tables, were human remains, each skeleton restrained by rusted cuffs locking wrists to the cold metal. No one needed confirmation to know who they were. The coroners later identified the remains through dental records. Ethan Walker, Samantha Turner, and Michael Reyes. The missing hikers whose families had waited a decade and a half for closure. But closure did not come. Because they weren't simply found, they were placed. The wrists showed signs of prolonged restraint. The bones revealed fractures inconsistent with an accident. Marks around the rib cages hinted at invasive procedures, incisions, perhaps, or experimental equipment once attached. Nearby, faded notebooks lay scattered across the floor. Many pages were charred, torn, or drenched by groundwater, but a few legible scraps raised far more questions than answers. Subject A shows resistance. Continue phase progression. Containment priority. Do not allow surface exposure. Authorities halted excavation until federal investigators arrived with specialized equipment. They ordered silence, sealing the scene from the public. Rumors circulated quickly, but official statements were vague. An underground facility containing human remains was discovered during a storm-related inspection. Investigation ongoing. Families received the news privately. Shock overshadowed grief. For years, they wondered whether their loved ones suffered in the wild. Now, they knew suffering had happened underground, at the hands of someone with knowledge, intent, and secrecy. The question was no longer where they disappeared. The question was, who put them there and why? Though the forest had finally given up its secret, it had not revealed the monster who built that lab, nor how such a place could exist beneath public land without detection. Answers remained buried in shadows, and the world was left to confront a terrifying reality. Someone once operated a hidden laboratory deep under Olympic National Forest, and that someone had murdered 3 young adventurers who simply wanted to explore the wilderness. The discovery of Ethan Walker, Samantha Turner, and Michael Reyes should have delivered justice. Instead, it produced only deeper fear. Their remains were laid to rest, but the shadows surrounding their final days remained untouched. Authorities confronted a chilling reality. The investigation had not uncovered a suspect, only evidence of planning, intelligence, and cruelty. Forensic experts studied the underground laboratory, yet every clue seemed designed to obscure accountability. Serial numbers on equipment were scratched away. Logbooks contained cryptic shorthand. Surveillance wiring existed, but no data storage was ever found. It was as if someone had erased themselves from history long before the world ever knew to look. The investigators attempted to trace ownership of the land. Records showed a chain of transfers between shell companies dating back decades. Each corporation dissolved shortly after acquisition, leaving no visible human connection. The structure could have been built by a private organization, a rogue scientist, or even a classified government project that someone later abandoned. Every theory sounded like it belonged in fiction until the lab was discovered beneath the very soil tourists walked on every day. Families of the victims demanded answers. They met with federal agents, hoping for clarity, but updates remained vague and unsatisfying. Sam's parents questioned why a facility capable of holding captives existed beneath a national forest. Michael's siblings wanted to know if their brother had been targeted or simply unlucky. Ethan's mother asked if her son had died quickly, or if he had spent days begging for help that would never come. Investigators could not offer comfort. They had only uncertainty. One unsettling detail kept resurfacing: signs of medical intervention. On the tables, fragments of specialized restraints suggested subjects were meant to remain alive during procedures. Scars etched into the bones hinted at prolonged containment, a possibility that haunted every conversation. Experts concluded the three friends were likely kept alive for some time before dying underground, isolated from sunlight, time, and hope. But why them? Why not ransom? Why no communication with authorities? Why three ordinary young adults out enjoying nature? Those questions remained unanswered. The FBI issued a formal statement acknowledging the presence of criminal experimentation but declined to release specifics. They cited national security considerations, three words that fueled more suspicion than relief. Conspiracy theories multiplied online: secret bioengineering trials, psychological conditioning studies, illegal weapon testing. The government offered no rebuttal. Silence became its own form of confession. Despite thousands of work hours and countless archived documents, no arrests were made. No suspects were publicly named. The case file remained active but stagnant, sealed in a cabinet marked with a classification far above ordinary investigations. It was clear that someone had the resources to build a clandestine lab and the power to ensure those responsible were never exposed. In the end, the truth recovered from the forest was only partial. Three friends entered the wilderness, believing in adventure, laughter, and memories. Instead, they became victims of an operation hidden so effectively that even 15 years later, the world still could not identify the hand that took them. The final chapter of Ethan, Sam, and Michael's story remained unwritten because their killer, or killers, remained free. Somewhere, the person who orchestrated those horrors might still be watching the news, fully aware that no one knows their name. And that is the most frightening part of all. The discovery of Ethan, Sam, and Michael should have closed the case. But instead, it opened a door no one dares to step through. Somewhere inside Olympic National Forest, miles of tunnels may still run beneath the earth, tunnels untouched, unexplored, and unmonitored. The lab where their bodies were found wasn't the beginning. It was only one room. There could be more. More evidence. More victims. More secrets no one ever wanted the public to know. Authorities have sealed the site. Rangers avoid the area. Maps have been quietly updated, rerouting trails far away from that ravine. But locals still talk. They say that on misty mornings, when the forest is silent and the wind carries a metallic echo, you can feel vibrations beneath the ground, the same low humming Ethan and his friends heard before they vanished. As if something below is waking up again. The three friends went into the forest to chase wonder. What they found instead was the darkness humanity tries hardest to hide. And that darkness is still out there, buried, but alive. So now we ask you, do you believe this was the work of a secret human experiment? A government project gone rogue? Or could there be something even more terrifying waiting below? Comment your theory below, because your voice matters more than you think. And if you want to follow every mystery hidden in the places most people overlook, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell. There are more stories like this. More vanishings with traces left behind. More questions buried in places we thought were safe. We'll be here, waiting to uncover the next truth the world isn't ready to face.